This is the Peugeot e-Kick, a clever little electric scooter with a top speed of 25 kilometers an hour and a range of 12 kilometers. And it's not what we've come here to review today, but it is one of the coolest accessories for this, the Peugeot 5008, the mid-sized 7-seat SUV that the French brand has high hopes for here in Australia. And given it's basically just a bigger version of the 3008 SUV that launched here last year, we've got high hopes for it too. So let's see if it lives up to the hype. The 5008 arrives in Australia in a 3-strong lineup. There is the cheapest, and yet not massively cheap, Allure, followed by the mid-spec GT line, both of which are powered by a turbocharged 1.6-litre petrol engine. Then there's the top-of-the-range GT, which nabs the only diesel engine in the range, a turbocharged 2-litre unit. There's plenty of kit right across the board too, with 18-inch alloys, roof rails, auto headlights and wipers, keyless entry, dual zone climate and an Apple CarPlay and Android Auto equipped multimedia setup, arriving as standard from the entry-level trim. Spring for the GT line, and you'll add things like an auto opening boot and a leather steering wheel, while the top spec GT gets bigger 19-inch alloys, Alcantara trim elements and heated front seats with a massage function for the driver. Now, normally when we do these reviews, we spend all our time in the front talking about technology, but when the car is as clever as this one, we need to dedicate some time to the back. Now, normally where I'm sitting is the worst seat in the house, but because each of these 3 seats is individually mounted on rails, even the middle passenger can decide how much legroom they get. Now, there's lots of other clever stuff going on too, like these 2 fold-down tables, the storage net at the back of each of these front seats, and there's actually 8 cup holders hidden around this car. There's room in every door for bottles and 3 ISOFIX attachment points across the middle row of seats. But it gets even cooler in the boot. Now, as you can see, with all 7 seats in place, you don't get that much boot room to play with. However, it is very, very easy to improve matters. So option 1, of course, is to simply drop the 3rd row, which frees up a lot more space. However, if that's still not enough, you can in fact remove the 3rd row altogether, freeing up yet another little cubby. Space is predictably tight in the 3rd row though, with the 2 rear spots feeling more like temporary jump seats rather than a full-time solution, but they're very handy for a big family nonetheless. But don't worry, it's not all about the passengers and cargo. Infotainment across all trim levels is operated by a clean and simple to use touchscreen. There's a digital screen that replaces the dials in the driver's binnacle, and you can expect sat-nav and digital radio too. The 5008 safety story is a solid one, with every model arriving with 6 airbags, a 360-degree parking camera with parking sensors, AEB, lane departure warning, speed sign recognition, adaptive cruise control and park assist. The good news though is that the driver and passenger don't miss out either. Now, you'll either love or hate the design in here, but if nothing else, it is unique. This kind of architecturally designed layered effect that is absolutely swimming with technology. That's an 8-inch screen, there's a 12.3-inch screen in the driver's binnacle, there's wireless phone charging, and these cool piano-style keys to control everything, all housed in a nicely polished, premium-feeling space. The 5008 is built off the brand's EMP2 platform, the same that underpins the 3008 SUV, and one that cost a staggering €630 million to develop. The good news is that despite being bigger than its predecessor in every important measurement, it's also lighter, and that can only be a good thing for dynamics. So as you know, the 5008 is available in 3 trim levels, the Allure, the GT line and the top spec GT. And this is that car, the GT, powered by a 2-litre diesel engine, good for 133 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. Before we get into all that, let's talk about the name for a second. Peugeot is very particular about what this car is called. They don't want it called the 5008. They don't even want it called the 5008. The car's name specifically is 5008. I don't know why, it must be a French thing. It's probably not important, but what is important is we've driven this car today on all sorts of road conditions, from twisty stuff to long straights to freeway driving, even some dirt sections and gravel runs, and we've been really impressed by the dynamics all day. It's not the quietest diesel we've driven, though the cabin insulation does a pretty good job of blocking that sound out, and there's no shortage of lag when you really put your foot down. But it does feel far more effortless in its acceleration than the petrol cars. One word of caution though, Peugeot uses an all-electric gear shift to select park, drive or reverse, and it can be both fiddly and slow to respond. Best take your time with it while you're still figuring out the quirks. Now, calling this car a dedicated 7-seater is probably a little bit cheeky. It's really a 5-seater with 2 extra seats when you need them, hence the reason they can be removed altogether for extra storage space. But that's actually a good thing. It means the car's not massive. It's only a little bit bigger than the 3008 that launched last year, and that hurts dynamics exactly not at all. It never feels big and billowy. It feels small, composed, really easy to maneuver, easy to park, easy to see out of. You're never intimidated by the car's size. Now, Peugeot faces an interesting problem here in Australia. You see, in France, they're not considered premium vehicles. They're France's answer to Holden or Ford, the homegrown heroes. Whereas here in Australia, they're really trying to position themselves as another European brand. So the result of all that is they've cut off the entry-level cars. They're starting from what would be the mid-range vehicle in France, but of course in Australia it becomes the entry-level vehicle. And it means that all their cars are a little bit more expensive, sure, but they are very well equipped, even from what we consider to be the entry-level allure. Now, that said, of course, Peugeot has to be realistic. They know they're not going to be taking too many sales away from the Germans, so instead they're targeting brands like Mazda or Honda, cars that we might consider to be semi-premium. So I guess the easiest way to sum up the drive experience in this car is that there's nothing unexpected here. If you're a fan of the 3008, and plenty of us are, this is just a bigger, more practical, more family-friendly version of it, and that's not a bad thing. And yes, it's fair to say that Peugeot doesn't appear on a whole bunch of shopping lists at the moment, but if you are in the market for a 7-seat family car, this one does deserve a test drive.